All right, let's continue. This will be a part 2 of the 50 game-changing podcasting tips in 15 minutes. So check out part 1. There'll be a link somewhere in the description card, all those things. And then we'll continue right now with number 26.
Next, always remember that your subscribers are real human beings. I know a lot of podcasters who complain because they only have hundreds of downloads or because only 50 to 100 people listen to each episode. Well, imagine all those people in an actual room and how different that feels. Well, it's kind of like that when people are listening to your show. They're like, imagine they all come to meet you every single week. I mean, that's powerful. So use that connection and use that small podcast of yours as an advantage because you get to know and contact and realize who is in your audience more than somebody who's much bigger who doesn't have the time or availability to do that. Now, if you're going to sell on your podcast, I mean, there's many ways to do this. You can have your own product sponsor the podcast, but I actually prefer to invite the customers and students and clients onto the podcast and have them talk about not how awesome the course or product is, but talk about their transformation. Before, what was life like? What were the struggles? What are the challenges that you had? And then what's life like after? When people hear that transformation story, they're going to want to go to who they got that help from. And of course, that's you and your product.
All right, so we kind of skipped the first one there, but it is powerful to think of how many people are listening. And if it's only 100 or 200, that is a lot of people listening to you every time you produce. So probably every week, but whatever that cadence is. And actually, some of the stats, I don't have the exact numbers, but I think the average podcast has about 200 listeners a month. So it's not a ton. So it's definitely attainable to reach those numbers. So that's great tip. And then number 27 was about having people on and telling, kind of their story and testimonials. That's really powerful if you're trying to sell. So great tip there.
Don't always worry about trying to get A-lister, huge celebrity podcast guests on your show. In fact, the best guests are the ones that are actually more relatable, the ones who are actually members of your audience or other B to C level podcasters. Plus, those podcasters are always going to enjoy conversations with other podcasters, and you're more likely to build a real relationship with them. If you're traveling to
not only are those people better to have on your show instead of the huge names, because while it might seem like a good idea to get, big name in your industry, they don't necessarily care about your show. They're not likely to share it. And the small people are, and they'll have a similar audience or similar friends and community that will want to hear them and you. So those smaller people are definitely better to have on your show. So don't worry about getting the big names. It's okay maybe every now and then, but go for the people who run Facebook groups or run other websites or other podcasts. Those are excellent guests to have.
To a podcast or some event where your audience might be or other friends and connections and colleagues, bring a microphone. I can't tell you how many times I wish I had a microphone recording conversations I had at these events. Bring a little handy microphone. You're not going to regret it.
There's a handful. Rode makes this really cool microphone interview kit where you plug into your iPhone and there's 2 lavalier, those like clip-on microphones. You can carry that in a little pouch. It's about this big, and that's an awesome way to have a microphone just in your pocket, always on you. So definitely some great options that you can just carry with you that aren't this big bulky thing. So take a look. I'll link up some of those options in the description.
As far as travel recording options go, there's 2 that I'd recommend. You can check out something like a micro recorder like the Zoom H6N, which is nice and portable recorder, or you can even hook up a special lavalier microphone to your iPhone or Android.
So that is exactly what I was talking about. I'll put a link to that one.
I prefer the Rode Smart Lav. You can get the extension and even a adapter to have 2 microphones plug in, and that way you can have an interview or just capture some audio on the go. Now, if you're a serious podcaster and you're at home, I recommend a little box called the Rodecaster Pro. Had a video about this, a little review. You can see exactly what it does, but it processes your audio. You can input several different microphones. There's a little soundboard in there as well, and it's just so easy to use. I also use it as a backup recording for my podcast as well.
I am using a Rodecaster Pro 2 right now to record this and kind of run everything through my computer. I have had the Rodecaster Pro original one. Rode actually sends these to me to check out and review and stuff, so that's awesome. Thanks to Rode for that. But these are awesome devices, and they have tons of flexibility, which almost can be too much. I was having trouble trying to configure how to get the right tracks to route to my computer just to make this video. So they can be overly complicated, but once you get them dialed in, they have tons of cool features, audio processing stuff. So if you can afford them, they're definitely not the cheapest, but if you can, they're really cool devices.
If you can, record the video version of your podcast as you are recording the audio, just so you have it. You can rip the audio out of that video and you can pop that into an audio podcast, and the video could live on YouTube. Here's a quick one. If you need an interview soon for your show and you don't have a lot of time, find a friend or a colleague and maybe do a collaboration or an exchange with them. And who knows, they might just say yes because you already know them. You don't have to go through the introduction period, and it's just a lot easier that way. Now, when you're interviewing other people, go deeper, right? Ask questions to follow up the answers that come in. That's where the golden answers exist, and that's where your podcast, if it's an interview show, is going to stand out. Even questions like why or how come you did that, just extending that answer more makes it so much better. Now, if
Pat is the expert when it comes to interviewing. Definitely not my expertise, but I know one tip that he has given is kind of lead people in, say, tell me about a time when, and try to draw out that story that we mentioned in the last video. Try to draw out a story from your guest if at all possible. So great tip there from Pat.
If you're doing a solo podcast, it can be a little bit harder to understand, well, how do I do this? Because I don't have just questions to ask. I have to create and present content. The way I do it is I think about the end in mind first. What's the transformation that I want a person to have? And then I reverse engineer what points, stories, case studies, etc. do I need to tell? And of course, I always try to have a good, solid hook in the beginning of the episode to make sure that they are more likely to stick around all the way through. Now, don't script your entire episodes. I've done this before, and it's a huge waste of time, and your podcast episodes sound like you're reading or like you're a robot. If anything, I do script maybe a little bit of the intro and hook just to make sure I get that right. But the other parts, I just know what's on my roadmap, and when I get there, I just talk about it naturally like I would with anybody else. Here's a big
This is a great tip. I actually tried to script an entire episode, and as I was reading through it, it sounded like it might have been okay. But then when you go listen back to it, it really sounds robotic and just not at all exciting to listen to. So definitely agree with that tip. Don't script everything. If you need to script an intro, like you said, that's a great way to make sure you hit on all your points and, write it out. And after you do it a few times, you'll probably be able to do it by memory, just by default. And maybe you want, if you have a guest on, you want to, write down some info about them. Make sure you have some, their links, social, whatever. So that way you can reference that yourself if maybe they don't or they forget to or something. So otherwise, yeah, definitely agree with that tip.
big one. You need to lean into who you are. That's what makes you 100% unique, and that's your unfair advantage. You're unlike anybody else that's out there. When you try to be like another podcaster or another creator, you're only going to be second at best. When you're fully you, you're going to attract the right kind of people into your community, and that's really powerful. Now, one of the issues with podcasting is that there's no real place for the podcast listeners to connect. So if you want your podcast listeners to connect with each other, you might think about creating a community. It could be something like a Facebook group or a LinkedIn group, but I recommend something like Circle, where you can bring people in and form an actual sort of private community that you can control and host. You can check out Circle at smartpassiveincome.com/circle.
This is really really great idea if you have enough people, because remember, not everyone is going to join your community. So if you only have 100 listeners and only 3 of them come into your community, that might not be the most exciting thing. So it's probably not something to start out with, but go back to the last video where we mentioned email list building. Make sure you start with that. And if you're getting a good amount of responses when you send out messages, then that might be a good indication that you're ready for that next step of creating a community.
Podcast episodes are great. Once or twice a year, especially at the end of the year, I love to do episodes where we play clips from older episodes during that year, or perhaps within a certain category, to remind people about those episodes. And even though people have maybe heard of those episodes before, it's a nice reminder. And for new listeners, it's a great introduction to episodes that they should go back and listen to.
That's actually a good point. Remember, you always have new listeners. So every time you introduce your show, you have to kind of think of both new people coming in and existing people. So don't be afraid to repeat the same things over and over. And like you said, go, every now and then go mention old episodes, because a lot of people will come in at the latest episode. They won't go back to the back catalog and listen to the older stuff. So it's okay to repeat some things. A lot of people will do kind of refreshes every year, the new guide for 2022, 23, 24, something like that. But it makes sense because you always have new people coming in.
Don't go into forums and groups and just start spamming your podcast episodes. Even if those podcast episodes are helpful for that group and you know that, if you just come in like hot like that, I mean, you're gonna get banned. Be a part of those communities first. Join the conversation and have those things that you talk about come out naturally. You want to get to a point where people are asking you for more information, and you can drop those things in with permission. To take
Simple enough. Don't be annoying. Don't spam people. That should be obvious.
that even further, one amazing strategy to get featured in these groups is to actually have the forum or group owner present your podcast in front of the audience. How do you do that? Well, interview that forum owner. They're likely not asked to do that very often. If they have really good information to share, you can make them look great, and they will be more likely to share it because you've made them look like a hero in front of their people. Don't compare your podcast numbers to others. You're different people.
Actually, that last tip, he uses that as a great. He kind of walks through a lot more about how to do that in some of his webinars, but it's a great way to get people who they run a group, they're experts in whatever topic that is. Let's say it's sewing or something, and they have a big audience that wants to learn more about that thing. So, you have them on, and then they're extremely likely to share that and to be proud that they went on a show. So it's an awesome way to build an audience, get a great interview. There's kind of a lot of benefits there.
People, you're different beings, you're in different timelines, you have different audiences. You cannot do that, or else you're just going to sink in a deep, dark hole. Trust me. You should be comparing yourself to yourself last week, to yourself last month. How is your episode this week compared to last week? Are you incrementally improving? You should be comparing yourself to yourself before and always trying to improve. When you share your podcast on social media, you have to realize that
I don't know if you've heard, but try to get 1% better every day, and then by the end of the year, you'll be 365% better. So that's just a great tip. Don't compare yourself to other people. You don't know how long they've been doing it. You don't know their past experience. Just compare to yourself and try to improve every episode.
is that you cannot force a person to listen on a directory or app that they just don't normally listen to podcasts on. There are two places I recommend you link on social media in regards to your podcast. Number one, your website, preferably the show notes page where there is a player, but also they could subscribe on all the different platforms in that one spot. Or two, on social, many people do this, you can do a link tree link where when people click, there's additional links there, one for every particular platform, and even other websites that you want to link to as well. At the start of your podcast episodes, you want to create an amazing hook, a reason for people to stick till the end. Because if a person's not going to stick around, well, the rest of the episode doesn't really matter. What could you say to a person to get them to put that phone in their pocket and then go on that run or go to the gym or go on that commute? That's what you want to nail. Here's one of my favorite tips. Ask your audience.
Great tip there. I mean, this applies to YouTube and all kinds of content creation, even writing blog posts. You want to hook people in, get them interested, and get them to the next minute, the next paragraph, the next frame, whatever you want to call it, whatever medium it is. You want to keep progressing them kind of down that line. So awesome tip there.
On social media who listened to the recent episode. Every single person who comments, reach out to them in a direct message and respond with a video and just thank them. Don't ask them for anything, just thank them. You're going to blow their minds, you're going to build super fans, and you're going to realize that there are real human beings on the other end who appreciate you and your podcast. Now imagine conducting a podcast interview and it just wasn't that great. Maybe the guest was a little dry or their answers weren't all that great. Here's the secret. Take one or two clips from the podcast episode and edit those into a show that's mostly going to be you. You can reach out to that person and say, you know what, I was so inspired by your answers to just the single question that I actually created an entire podcast episode just about that. So I play your clip, but I go deeper on it, and I just want to thank you for that. And now you didn't hurt the person's feeling, and you have a good episode that's going to come out. Listicle episode.
Yeah, this can be a problem, and I've actually been on both sides of this. So great idea of how to solve this problem. I don't know if you've heard those kind of NPR style shows. You can make it a little more highly produced or something, or like you said, just kind of take some clips and cut them into your episode and really expand on some of those points that they made. And that's a great way to use content that you spent time getting that just wasn't up to snuff for your show.
Or episodes like top 10 this or the top 5 this or a list of whatever. People love lists. However, if you want to take this one step further, before you reveal what's on the list, tell a story that leads up to it. In fact, the punchline will be the number or that particular tip. All the music that you play on your podcast should be royalty-free or custom made for you from somebody that you hired and you know you have the rights to use. I had a friend who licensed music from a band that he enjoyed, and that's all great, right? You could do that, you could pay for that, but those licenses often end, and this person's did, and as soon as that happened, he wasn't allowed to publish any of those episodes anymore, and he had to actually remove the entire podcast from all directories. Don't do that. Custom music, royalty-free, that's it. Have fun.
Yeah, this is a big one, and I get a lot of questions about this, actually. People ask, can I use this music or can I get a license? Just the answer is no. Stay away from music that you would play on the radio, Spotify, or whatever. Find a royalty-free track. There's tons of different websites. I actually have an article that I'll link up that lists a few different websites that you can check out. Just get those and stay away from dealing with licenses and podcasting. It just turns into a mess, and who knows, you might not get sued. It's a possibility, though, or your show might get taken down. I have seen some of the platforms reach out to the hosting companies that host the podcast and ask them to remove shows that have copyrighted material. So again, just stay away from that.
Podcasting is super fun. You can connect with amazing people. You can build relationships. You can build an audience. You can build super fans. It is one of the most fun things I've ever done, and this is why I've been doing it for so long. It's just so fun. As you're ending a podcast episode, don't spend too much time summarizing and going on and on and on about the things that have happened and the things that are coming up. I mean, you can mention some of those things to tease and get people excited. Call to action, great, but err on the side of quick. Here's why. If you give clues that your stuff is ending, people are more likely to be in that mindset to leave, and maybe they're already going to try to find something else. But if you kind of end almost abruptly, I mean, you want to close off, right? But if you end almost abruptly, it's now an opportunity for them to already start diving into the next episode. This is similar to the kinds of things we do on YouTube to hold people's attention and get people into the next video. Speaking of, the next video for you as a podcaster is right there. Thank you.
All right, so that's a great tip too. Just end quickly. I know exactly like you said, YouTube is similar. You don't want to kind of indicate that it's ending because people will leave, and that can affect some of your viewing stats and retention and all that. Same thing applies with podcasting. So, yeah, thanks a lot to Pat for creating this video. It was fun to kind of hear some of these tips, and I hope to take a look at some more of his videos soon.